You've probably heard, at least in passing, of the total fraud and meltdown of FTX, one of the largest crypto exchanges in the entire world, resulting in millions of people losing whatever funds they had stored on the platform. But what you might not know is that before all of this went down, Canada introduced a bill called the Encouraging the Growth of the Crypto Asset Sector Act, potentially bringing major changes with it. And now that the prices of these digital assets are down and all the news around crypto is extremely negative, well, these politicians are taking a dramatically different tone. But what just happened with this bill could lead millions of Canadians to get scammed out of their hard-earned money. So let's talk about what just happened with this new law and how it could affect tons of Canadians long term, how you can protect yourself, and the boatload of political games that have been going on behind the scenes. To understand what's going on, you first have to understand what was inside of this bill, and it's super simple to understand. You also have to click that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, of course, if you find this kind of content useful. The bill, if passed, would force the Minister of Finance, who's currently Chrystia Freeland, to develop a crypto asset framework over the next 3 years and get started on that rather soon. The framework could include anything, including the types of protections that could stop something like FTX from happening more broadly in Canada, while also trying to make it easier to work in the crypto asset sector while protecting the people who work in it. And I talked in a lot more detail about this bill when it was introduced back in April, and I mentioned some of my greatest fears with the bill, that this would be an issue that becomes hyper-politicized with the left and right fighting at each other, trying to get cheap political points. This is what I said back in April. And this fear isn't unwarranted. We're already seeing a huge division between crypto supporters and detractors, with the detractors saying, hey, it's an environmentally damaging Ponzi scheme, while the supporters at the same time are saying that it could solve all of the world's issues. The reality is it's somewhere in the middle. Now, I definitely lean on the more crypto positive side, but my main fear here is that the pros and cons won't be debated with insight from industry experts, and instead this will be sort of polarized and politicized, where liberals say they hate crypto and conservatives say they love crypto, without the actual merits of individual pros and cons being weighed. But it seems that the very fear that I was mentioning back in April is becoming a reality, with political fighting already starting to happen, but we'll get into that in just a second. Now, it's no secret that crypto prices are down significantly right now, along many other asset classes, since the Bank of Canada and the Federal Reserve in the United States have dramatically increased interest rates, going from this era of cheap money, low interest rates, to the high interest rate hiking environment we're in today, where it looks like there's constantly a recession looming on the horizon. Since these changes started, Canada's real estate is down 10%, the S&P 500, the 500 largest companies in America, while those stocks are down 15%, as well as more risky, higher tech stocks in America are down even more dramatically. Google's down 34%, and Meta, the owner of Facebook, is down 67%, and of course, crypto is down significantly, down 71% in the past year. And with digital assets like Bitcoin and Ether taking such a hit, politicians who didn't speak out against cryptocurrency while prices were high are now coming out in droves, speaking out against it now that prices are low, specifically piling on to any politicians that had any positive words for the industry previously, most notably the new leader of the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre.
Mr. Speaker, while the Conservatives think Bitcoin and buzzwords will solve inflation, on this side, we'll always stand on the side of supporting the middle class.
We've already talked about the Conservative leader's reckless advice to Canadians to invest in crypto. It is time for him to apologize. If Canadians had listened to him, a $10,000 investment would have shrunk by 65%. That is cruelty, Mr. Speaker.
So the leader of the Conservative Party was promoting crypto, but then we found out he was an investor in crypto. And I think that that's really, really telling, because with a Ponzi scheme, you'd only get your money back if you sucker other rubes to put their money in too. So we had the leader of the Conservative Party using his platform to tell Canadians who were worried about their savings, hey, invest in crypto. This is where I'm going to get my money back. Highly irresponsible, Madam Speaker.
This isn't new. Politicians take cheap shots all the time, whether they're Conservative, Liberal, NDP, Bloc Québécois, it doesn't matter. But the danger here is that because no party wants to be associated with crypto in any way, while the news is all bad, further frauds and further scams like FTX could continue to happen because there's not strong regulation, while at the very same time, any legitimate businesses or any legitimate tech jobs that we could be growing in Canada as a result of this industry are also ignored. And a similar sentiment is echoed here by Michelle Rempel-Garner, a conservative who actually brought this bill forward in the first place. Here's what she said just ahead of the vote on this bill.
How can we sit here and say that we should not be putting together a growth framework that provides all of the safeguards that we've been talking about here for an area of the economy that we so desperately need? Colleagues of different political stripe talk about how the people who work in my community in natural resources-based jobs need to transition away from these jobs into digital economy-based jobs. Guess what, guys? Digital assets jobs, those are the very jobs you all are talking about. It's those jobs. This can go to committee and every single different party can edit the scope of the framework. I made it purposely nonpartisan. Why would we leave this to happen behind closed doors in the government, if it happens at all, without the input of industry? The Americans are having a legislative framework. The Europeans are having a legislative framework. Yet we're sitting here trading partisan barbs instead of talking about how we grow a sector that could be the solution to all of our job problems in this country. Yes, we need safeguards. Yes, we need better rules. But we're the ones that are supposed to do that. Why are we abdicating this responsibility? I don't want to look back in 10 years on this debate and say that we missed an opportunity because of partisanship. Go back to your colleagues on Wednesday, have a caucus meeting, and support this bill through to committee stage.
So if this bill were to be voted forward, it wouldn't make this bill law. Instead, this bill would go to committee, the Finance Committee, where members of all different parties could come together to make amendments to the bill, changes to the bill, to make sure that the kind of consumer protections that are important for Canadians make its way inside of this bill, while also making sure that any legitimate businesses or individuals who work in the sector would be protected and would be able to contribute to the Canadian economy. But instead of taking these steps and improving the education that politicians have on this industry, instead this bill was voted down and none of this consultation will take place. The big issue with this is that the largest problems in crypto are due to centralized services like FTX, not due to the underlying technology, but due to private companies who mismanage customer funds, the very thing that politicians are supposed to regulate. In fact, this is the biggest issue that the Bank of Canada has with cryptocurrency. Here's what Governor Deputy Carolyn Rogers said just the other day on crypto.
So I think here in Canada, people are used to any business that tells you I'm going to hold your money safely so that you can use it to facilitate payments. That's an activity that Canadians are used to being safe and regulated. And so our concern is that these things make themselves look like more traditional forms of payment systems, and there is a risk that Canadians don't fully appreciate the risk they're exposing themselves to when they put assets in these things.
So the issue is that people don't know what's trustworthy, and some might assume that since an exchange has a flashy website, a good user experience, good user interface, that they have the same kinds of protections that they have with their bank, that they're regulated in the same way.
It looks like it took, that side of the business took a lot of losses, and so those assets that were supposed to be held in custody for trading purposes on the platform have disappeared. That's exactly the type of thing that financial regulation, in more mainstream financial regulation, has dealt with years ago.
So Carolyn Rogers says that the kind of protections that these crypto companies need already exist in the traditional financial services industry, and it's reasonable to believe that if politicians were to sit down and to study the various consumer protections that people need, that they would recognize, hey, we can apply some of these things we're already applying to banks to these private companies. But it seems that these discussions that could have happened in committee if the bill were passed at least to the next stage won't be happening, which could lead more and more people into risky situations where their funds could be lost. And I think the main reason this bill was voted down and all of this consultation won't be happening is because of the language inside of the bill, specifically the bill's name, an act respecting the encouragement of the growth of the crypto asset bill. Having encouragement and growth and crypto assets as the main points in your bill, especially at a time when the news is how it is, doesn't make your party look all that good if you vote in favor of it. Instead, maybe language like including the regulation and safeguarding of consumers, something like that inside of the title of the bill, might make it easier for Liberal or NDP or Bloc Québécois governments to actually present this to people as a win. But since these discussions around consumer protections on a federal level won't be happening, it's very, very, very important that you, if you are someone who invests in cryptocurrency or has any interest in it, know how to protect yourself from mass failures like we've seen with FTX. And the number one thing you can do is to take your funds off of exchanges. Exchanges, centralized exchanges, some that I've talked about here on the channel, you should go into those to purchase your digital assets, but then not to store your digital assets long term. Instead, you should take custody of your own assets using your own digital wallet. By transferring out of an exchange, if anything goes belly up like FTX did, well, your assets aren't on there anymore, so you're not affected, right? Now, once you've transferred your digital assets out of the exchange, you should probably make sure that your digital wallet is secured by a hardware wallet like a Ledger or a Trezor or a Grid Plus, Lattice One. These are all hardware wallets that provide an additional layer of security to make sure that people who have access to your computer won't simply be able to take your funds. Instead, there's additional layers that they have to get past, which are all like pretty much impossible to get through. I've got videos on how to set up a ledger, so I'll link it right there if you're interested in taking a look at it. But I'm curious what you think about all this. Do you think it's good that Canada's just turning a blind eye to crypto now, especially given that prices are down and faith in the industry is a lot lower than it had been in the previous years? Or do you think that, on the other hand, it might be a little bit irresponsible that the Canadian government isn't taking a closer look at this to figure out how we can get more consumer protections, but also if there are any positive benefits to allowing industries like this to bloom in a safe and regulated way in Canada? Let me know what you think about all this down in the comment section. I read every single one. I try to get back to a bunch of them. And of course, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, make sure to do that. You'll keep on getting updates from me. I've been pretty much daily with the videos for the past month or so. So if you appreciate that kind of content, make sure to subscribe. It helps out the channel dramatically. But with all that said, thanks so much for watching, everybody. I really hope this video helped you out at least a little bit, and I'll see you next time.